We'd now like to call on our brother Brian Luke to give us the fourth session of the day, which he entitles, I Had Rather Be a Doorkeeper in the House of My God. Brother Brian.
Thanks, Brother Ron. I'd like us to come back to an earlier chapter in Chronicles, the First of Chronicles, chapter 6. Now, as you know, there were three main branches of the Levites, and verse 1 tells us their names. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And this chapter is about the sons of Levi and their divisions and the line of the priests and the line of the singers. It's an interesting chapter in that regard. So we have the three branches of them in verse 1. And then it gives to us of the sons of Kohath. And in verse 4, it gives us the lineage of the priesthood. Eleazar was a son of Aaron, and his son was Phinehas, and so down the line it goes right through to verse 14. And verse 15, Azariah begat Seraiah, and Seraiah begat Jehozadak, and so on, under the time of Nebuchadnezzar and his invasion. So that's the line of the priesthood. Then in verses 16 to 30, because the priests were of the greatest and most important office, it then gives to us the line of the principal person in each of the three divisions of Levi. So it repeats in verse 16, the sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. And the lineage of Gershon is given in verses 20 to 21. And the lineage of Kohath is given in verses 22 through to verse 28. All right? And then still following the principal person in each of those three divisions, we have the sons of Merari in verse 29, and that goes through to the end of verse 30. So there's the three main branches of the Levites. The priests are taken to one side, and then we're given the line of the principals of those three main divisions of the Levites. And then it says in verse 31, these are they whom David set over the service of song in the house of the Lord after that the ark had rest. So from verses 31 to 48, we have the genealogy of the three principal singers. Now I wonder if in our ecclesial life we would attribute that kind of importance to singing and praise and song. I wonder. I just suggest that the loveliest thing that you can do in ecclesial life is to combine your study of the word, which inspires the heart, with expressions of song and praise, which involve the heart and the feelings of our community. I think they've been some of the most happy times in our ecclesial life where there's been a nice connection of those two things. So often it's easy to have a brother get the first one, but the second one involves us all, and perhaps we don't find it so easy, time being like it is sometimes, to get the practices in place and to be able to enjoy a multitude of people expressing themselves in joy to God. I mean, it's like in Bible school when somebody turns up with a piece of music, and within about 4 days we get it all together, don't we? You never know how it was done. Even to the second last practice, you're sure it will never work, but there it is, the night's put on, it works. And it's always a very, very wonderful and happy night. And that's done really in Bible schools around the world. Same thing's done at Rathmines. Everybody arrives and nobody has any idea what music we're going to be singing. And yet by, I think it's Thursday night also, there's an evening put on, and you'd think, they've been working on it for weeks. So that's something to remember in ecclesial life. If you're going to have an effort and bring joy into meeting and the understanding of the Word of God, see if we can combine that with something that involves more people more hearts open, more giving expression to God, singing and making melody in their hearts so that the ecclesial hall is filled with people with exultant thoughts and expressions in their mind. And you know, David was great enough to always see that. One of the things that comes down through history about David is that, isn't it? Wasn't he an amazing man? A man of so many parts. He could write, he could fight, he could bring together, he could revive, he could inspire, he could write psalms, he could find the music, made instruments, organised. What an incredible man he was. Man of all parts. An absolutely amazing man of God. Well, and these are they whom David set over, you see, in verse 31, when the ark had rest. They ministered before the dwelling place of the tabernacle of the congregation with singing. Didn't wait until the temple, note. This got underway before the temple, when there was just a tabernacle there, tabernacle of David, that he had set up. It was just a tent structure. Didn't have any mercy seat and cherubim. They had yet to come with the ark. When the ark was brought in, he actually constructed this tabernacle for them. And David either had the other furniture that never came into the tabernacle of David. The ark came in, and then these things began to happen. He didn't wait until the building of the temple. He got underway when, as soon as that ark had arrived, he then instituted these things. They ministered before the dwelling place of the tabernacle of the congregation with singing until Solomon had built the house of Yahweh in Jerusalem. And then they waited on their office according to their order. Now we're beginning to really understand that, aren't they? Because the order was made. We saw that in those other references in our last study. It was an order established under David by the writing of the Spirit upon his hand, and then that went down for hundreds of years. All right. Did you notice this is all about the Levites? Pretty important people, these singers, weren't they? We've only just been told who were the principal people down the line of the three main branches. The next people we're told about are the principal singers. I don't know that we attribute that degree of importance upon that office in our ecclesial life. So there's something to take back home, isn't it? And here we go, verse 33. Three branches of the Levites? Well, there was a principal from each. And these are they that waited with their children. That's an interesting thing. We're going to see how that develops. With their children. Of the sons of the Kohathites, Heman, a singer. Now, he's the one that had 14 sons that we read about in 1 Chronicles chapter 25. And you'll see there's a little reference there across in the margin. Heman, a singer. Now, he was in the Kohathites, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So he comes down that line. And if you look back just a couple of names, you'll see it says the son of Joel. Who had a boy called Joel? Samuel, somebody said. And that's where it says in the next little statement, the son of Shemuel. And that should be Samuel. And he was the son of Elkanah, and that's what it says in verse 34. So that's our Samuel. Isn't that interesting? So Heman was a grandson of Samuel. This is a lot more interesting, this record, than what we suspected, isn't it? Samuel, Elkanah, and then back the other way to Heman. Well, where does the lineage go back to? Verse 37, we're still going back to Kohath. And it says, the son of Tahath, the son of Aser, the son of Ebiasaph, the son of Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, the son of Israel. Well, that's a very interesting genealogy, isn't it? It starts from Kohath to Izhar to Korah. And we all know who Korah was, don't we? Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. In Numbers chapter 16, they arose, didn't they, and rebelled against the authority of Moses and Aaron. And Korah lost his life. And yet here's a genealogy that continues on after him and runs right down to Samuel and to his grandson, who was He-Man. Now that's an interesting thing, because Joel didn't go too well, did he? He didn't go too good. There was 2 sons of Samuel, and they were not as their father. But nevertheless, Joel had a son whose name was He-Man, and he became a remarkably wonderful person. So there's some inspiration too, isn't it? And sometimes you see that in the truth. Somebody can come back, the next generation, and they can be quite inspirational in ecclesial life, whereas in fact their parent was, a bit hazy about things sometimes. Verse 39. And it says, and his brother Asaph, who stood on his right hand, even Asaph the son of Berechiah, and then the genealogy runs down until we get to Gershon, verse 43, who was the son of Levi. Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. So Asaph is from Gershon, and He-Man is from Kohath. What about Merari? Verse 44. And their brethren, the sons of Merari, stood on the left hand. Ethan, the son of Kishi. And he goes right back, it says, to Merari, verse 47, the son of Levi. 3 branches of the Levites. From each branch there were singers taken. And their names were He-Man from Kohath, verse 33. Asaph from Gershon, verse 39. And Ethan, verse 44, from the sons of Merari. So we can see that the singers were taken from the 3 main branches of the Levites. There was a component of each. And that's what our chapter has outlined for us. And verse 31 and 32 illustrate that they were brought into their office when the ark came into the tabernacle of David. When the ark came to rest, then the singers voiced their praise in continuous rounds of service in song. And obviously they were very, very important as far as David was concerned, and that's why their names are given after such auspicious people before that. Now if we come back to our chapter in Chronicles, the first of Chronicles, chapter 25, we note firstly in verse 1 what we noted in the previous study, that David was going to induct them into office in the company of very auspicious people. There was the king and the captains of the host. And it says that they separated to the service of the sons of Asaph and of He-Man and of Jeduthun. Now we understand that now, don't we? The 3 branches of the Levites all represented. Except that whereas he was called Ethan in 1 Chronicles 6, here he is called Jeduthun. Why then did David bring in these captains of the host? Why couldn't he have brought in princes or priests or other things? Well, I think there's a reason for that. And the reason is seen very beautifully in 2 Chronicles chapter 20. What David was saying was that these men with their instruments and their praise to God are greater than military generals. 100 years later, there is a threat from Edom and Moab and the children of Ammon against Judah in the days of King Jehoshaphat. Then upon Jahaziel, verse 14, the son of Zechariah, the son of Benaiah, this is 2 Chronicles 20, verse 14. Upon Jahaziel, the son of Zechariah, the son of Benaiah, the son of Jehiel, the son of Mattaniah, a Levite of the sons of Asaph, came the Spirit of the Lord in the midst of the congregation, and he said, Hearken ye, all Judah and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem, and thou King Jehoshaphat, thus saith the Lord unto you, Be not afraid nor dismayed by reason of this great battle. For the battle is not yours, but God's. Tomorrow go ye down against them. Behold, they come up by the cliff of Ziz, and ye shall find them at the end of the brook before the wilderness of Jericho. Ye shall not need to fight in this battle. Set yourselves, stand ye still, and see the salvation of the Lord with you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Fear not, nor be dismayed. Tomorrow go out against them, for the Lord will be with you. And Jehoshaphat accepted that. He bowed his head with his face to the ground, and all Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem fell before Yahweh, worshipping him. And the Levites of the children of the Kohathites and of the children of the Korites stood up to praise Yahweh, God of Israel, with a loud voice on high. Now you can understand why it's saying that in verse 19, because the three branches of the Levites were involved in the singing. And they haven't lost their customs and their abilities and their knowledge of the music and of the words and how to do it. Because here, just in this sudden instant, when they're brought to this crisis in Israel, they know what to do. And they're not concerned about the enemy. It's one of their number in verse 14 that stood up and said to the king, "Don't fear, O king. This matter is of God, and God will deliver us." So when they should be preparing for war and sharpening their knives and getting their spears ready, this group is standing up to praise Yahweh, God of Israel, with a loud voice on high. And they rose early in the morning and went forth into the wilderness of Tekoa. And as they went forth, Jehoshaphat stood and said, "Hear me, O Judah and ye inhabitants of Jerusalem. Believe in Yahweh your God, so shall ye be established. Believe his prophets, so shall ye prosper." Imagine that, the army's marching out, the king saying to them these things. Who inspired him? Those singers. They were not ordinary men, were they? They were leaders in faith that had kept up a practicing culture through persistence. There was ingrained into their minds from very young ages in such a way that they would never let it go, so that hundreds of years later, this is 100 years from the days of David, 100 years down the track, they knew exactly what to do at the right moment. And you think of your own children, or your own grandchildren, or great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. And what confidence would you have, my dear brothers and sisters, that they would have in their heart the same strength of belief that you have, or that your parents have? So you're looking at something very great, very wonderful. That same strength of feeling is in those who, at a moment's crisis, they went out into the street, so to speak, and they led the army. They did. When he had consulted with the people, verse 21, he appointed singers unto Yahweh, and that should praise the beauty of holiness as they went out before the army, and to say, "Praise the Lord, for his mercy endureth forever." And when they began to sing and to praise, Yahweh set ambushments against the children of Ammon. And when they got there, there wasn't a living man to contend with them. What did it? The song. Who's greater, Benaiah or Joab or Asaph, Jeduthun and Heman? It was the note of praise to God that brought God onto their side. And so those great generals were learning as much as what the singers ever learnt. And they had to come and see the importance of the induction of that office. And I can imagine them standing there with all their generals' uniforms and thinking, this is kid stuff. What am I being brought into this for? But David was teaching them and all the nation that there's more strength in the voice of song and praise than there is in the training of military might. What an amazing man David was. You look at all in verse 1. What an unexpected bringing together of facts. David and the captains of the host separated to the service of the sons of Asaph, Heman and Jeduthun, who should prophesy with harps. What's different? What's the more contrasting than a man of military might and a harp? But that's what David had come to learn, that the songs of God and the praise of God brought the great God of heaven on your side, and it was stronger than steel. And so these men are enumerated for us. It said that they prophesied with harps, with psalteries and with cymbals, and the number of the workmen according to their service was It tells us, in fact, of the sons that each one had. Asaph is mentioned first in verse 2. He becomes the principal of them. Then it mentions Jeduthun in verse 3, and he had 6 sons. And then it mentions Heman in verse 4, and he had 14 sons. Add that up. 6, 4, and 14. Yes, it makes 24 again, doesn't it? So from each one of these principal families of the singers, there are key boys that are chosen. 4 in Asaph's, 6 in Jeduthun's, and 14 in Heman's. They are chosen to be these leaders of song. You know, it really is an incredibly interesting record, isn't it? It says that they were under the hands, verse 2, of Asaph. And then it says, who prophesied according to the order of the king. But the AV is just hiding something there a little, because under the hands is the same expression as according to the order. So what that's really saying is that there was their father's hands upon them. My son, this is how you're going to do it. And upon his hands was the hands of the king, so to speak. So who was the prime initiator and conceiver of the concept? It was David, wasn't it? And Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun were going to do exactly as the king said. And their boys were going to do exactly what Dad said. There's a miracle, isn't it? Now, isn't that an amazing thing, my dear friends? I do find this whole study just absolutely amazing. And there were 24 boys, and in verses 9 to 31, there were 24 courses. Now, let's pick up the idea, and we'll come back to some of those words and pull out some of the beautiful things. But you see, in verse 8 it says they cast lots, ward against ward, course against course, as well the small as the great, the teacher as the scholar. They weren't all as skillful as each other. Now the first lot came forth for Asaph to Joseph. And if you swing across to Asaph's names in verse 2, you'll see that his second boy was called Joseph. See? Got that? Joseph mentioned in verse 9, the first lot came for him, and he was the second son of Asaph. Now the second lot came to Gedaliah. And if you look across again to verse 3, you'll see that Gedaliah is the first mention of Jeduthun's sons. All right? So it follows that pattern right through. And we have from verse 9 to 31, we have 24 of these boys. And with each of them, there were 12. So they've got 3 principals. We've got their 24 sons. And each one of those 24 has got 12 associated with him. 12 times 24 is 288. So we have a male choir of 288 boys, skillful with instruments, under the hands of their fathers, and the king's hands, his authority, upon them. Now, doesn't that tell you something about David again? It really shows there's some great things in these things, my dear brothers and sisters. You know, when you've got something coming up in ecclesial life and you're busy, the event can come and go and you think, oh, I really never got into that. I know there must be many people that feel that way. I never really got involved in that. And, you know, we could have done so much more. We could have turned that occasion into a really wonderful thing. We had done this. And, you know, if that had worked in with that, and if we had have gone on to do it this way, oh, wouldn't that have been marvellous if we'd seen the whole picture and developed it all up? Had those feelings? Many times, eh? Well, the event came and it was okay, but it could have been special. You know, David was the type of person who wouldn't let it just be ordinary. It would be special. Because he came right down from his throne and all the things he had to worry about, and his ill health and 38,000 Levites and a kingdom that didn't want him, or half of them didn't, and so on. Training his son Solomon to take over. All of those issues that he had. He came down from all of that, and he saw that they were making the instruments the exact way that he had said they should. In fact, he designed them. What did he know about designing of instruments? Could you make an instrument? Well, David did. The king, the shepherd boy, the warrior, the psalmist, the writer, the inspiring administrator. He could also design instruments and make sure that they were made according to that pattern. Oh, what an amazing man. Truly a great man. And these boys then had to learn from their father exactly how they should play those parts. What things should be said on this particular day, and what psalms should be said on that particular day, and how they should sing it, and the parts, no doubt, that they would have. What an inspiration, arranging brethren, others that are associated with ecclesial administration. To not say, I'm too busy, I'll just let the thing pass, but say, I've got to make my contribution, if I possibly can, to this occasion that's coming up. Because when it comes up, it must be special, because it's to God. Not just another thing ticked off the ecclesial program, but something special that's going to involve everybody and lift up the hearts unto Yahweh. Well, that's what he was like. And because, you see, God had seen in this that there was going to be 24 elders in the future, which are going to be typical of Jew and Gentile, of the saints, who will be king, priests, and singers. Revelation 5, they lifted up their voice. They've made us kings and priests. They're singers too, aren't they? And there's Jew and Gentile, so there's 12 of each for both Israel. And there's thousands of them, not 288, but there's thousands upon thousands. But because that's the pattern of the future, therefore there was 2 times 12 back here. And they were gathered out of all of these families because God had that pattern in mind. Isn't it a beautiful thing? The Bible is a wonderful book. Nothing else like it, is absolutely nothing else like it. So these boys are going to give, in the lowly circumstances of Israel 3,000 years ago, they're going to give a pattern of things that are going to expand out until they'll be seen in all their beauty in the kingdom of God. Let's come back to Asaph. Then it says that he prophesied. Verse 1, it said that they prophesy with harps. He was definitely the leading individual. 12 psalms were written by this Asaph. A wonderful man indeed, and probably he was the chief musician, almost certainly, that you have referred to in the Psalms. It says, Jeduthun prophesied with harps. See verse 3? Who prophesied with a harp to give thanks and to praise Yahweh. He-Man is spoken of as the king's seer. Verse 5. These were the sons of He-Man, the king's seer, in the words of God to lift up the horn. He was one of the prophets around David. Remember Gad that we had in 2 Samuel 24? Well, there was other prophets. Nathan was another one. He-Man was another one. David had a group of different prophets around him because he was a man of God. Saul, who didn't know the prophets, was he? He came to Samuel and he said, "Do you know where Samuel lives?" And Samuel said, "I'm him." There on his doorstep. Saul didn't know who he was, but David did. He had all these prophets around him. And he now was instituting this. So all these singers were prophets. And that too is instructive, my dear brothers and sisters, isn't it, in our ecclesial life, because when we do make song to God, there's got to be a content to it. We don't just want tunes that are happy and nice and light and easy. That's not really the point of it, is it? It is a praise unto God, and it's a very good thing. So beautifully illustrated in a lot of our hymns, where the content evidences that there's a rich mind in the things of God. They are our best hymns. You know, we think about a hymn book now, aren't we? A new hymn book, a new hymn book. Well, you know, the best thing you can do for that hymn book is to write a good, solid hymn. If you've got the ability, you know someone has, then do it now, because the time to do it is now. But our most beautiful hymns are those in which there's a real content. These men were not found, reading comics in their spare time. You wouldn't find them caught on the internet. You wouldn't find them dribbling their nice away with novels. They were men of God, men of the Word of God. So therefore they had a mind that made sure that the praise to God had content in it. There was power in what they were doing. And that's what we need in our ecclesial life. Not just sweet songs that sometimes seem to almost echo what you hear outside, but something's got content. So the mind is touched as the heart is touched. That's an important thing, very important thing. And I'm sure that that is becoming to our God. They prophesied with harps. How do you do that? You're playing an instrument. How do you prophesy with a harp? Where did that idea come from? It's Samuel, isn't it? 1 Samuel chapter 10. In 1 Samuel chapter 10, Saul is trying to find his asses. And he has stumbled across the prophet. And the prophet anoints him with oil. And he is given direction. This is what it says in verse 5. 1 Samuel 10 verse 5. After that thou shalt come to the hill of God, where is the garrison of the Philistines. And it shall come to pass, when thou art come thither to the city, that thou shalt meet a company of prophets, coming down from the high place, with a psaltery and a tabret and a pipe and a harp before them. And they shall prophesy. That's where it comes from. It's a Samuel piece of culture. He has linked together the praise of God with the knowledge of God. The study of the word, to put it in our terms, with singing and praise unto God. Samuel's brought that. And it says in verse 6, and the Spirit of the Lord will come upon thee, Saul, and thou shalt prophesy with them, and shalt be turned into another man. Saul stumbled up to the house of Samuel and didn't even know where he was. And he lived just round the corner, so to speak. If you look at the map and have a look where Geba was and where Naoth was, you'll find, look, it was just down the road. And he didn't have a blue clue who the prophet was. And he lived alongside him. And he thought you'd go to the prophet to find out where your asses were. That's how much he knew. In fact, his servant knew more about the prophet than he did. He said, at least you take a gift. Saul was very happy to take a gift. But really, he knew nothing of the prophet that lived down the road. Now, that says oceans about Saul. David was an entirely different person. But in the mercy of God, and isn't it great, he brought Saul into that company. He said, Saul, I want you to experience something you've never known. When you get involved in that company that are coming down the hill singing praise to God with their instruments, this company of prophets, you'll be turned into another man. It's like coming away for a study weekend, isn't it? All the other things that were worrying us back home, they sort of drop off after a while, and we begin to see what's really important. And let it be, when these signs are come unto thee, that thou do as occasion serve thee, for God is with thee. And God gave him another heart, it says in verse 10, when he came. Isn't that beautiful? Saul saw that and forgot it. But David didn't. In 1 Samuel 19, it's David's turn now. He's going to go to Samuel's house. And he's in extremity. He didn't live close to Samuel, but he knew absolutely all about him. There was a kindred spirit in this man. And in 1 Samuel 19, verse 18, it says, when Saul was seeking to destroy David, what a crazy man. And there was David playing with the harp. You know, it was as though he was in the company of the prophets again. There was a young man in front of him playing with all the skill that he could and endeavouring to turn that melancholy spirit away from the king. And you can imagine, my dear brothers and sisters, with what feeling he would have done that. With what sincerity he would have done that. To try and turn his father-in-law into another man and to take away that melancholy feeling that he had and disposition that everything was against him. And to convey to him a sense of positive well-being as he was ruler of Israel. David would have done that with all the skill of his heart and of his fingers. And Saul threw a sword at him in the middle of it. He'd forgotten entirely what he had learnt in the company of the prophets, hadn't he? But David escaped from his own house. Michael letting him over the wall. And he fled, verse 18, and escaped and came to Samuel to Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. He knew where to go, didn't he? And he and Samuel went and dwelt in Naioth, which must have been just outside of Ramah, eh? Ramah was the village, and Naioth means a dwelling. And I think it's a lovely word, isn't it, in the context, because it was the dwelling. It was where the God of Israel was dwelling, wasn't he, really? In Samuel. In that house was the Spirit of God dwelling. So there was Ramah, but he was the dwelling, people called it. And Samuel went straight to it. He didn't need to tell him where it was. And all his troubles vanished. And it was told Saul, saying, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. And Saul sent messengers to take that. Why didn't he go himself? And when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying and Samuel standing as appointed over them, the Spirit of God was upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied, and they never went home. And Saul got to know. So he sent other messengers, verse 2. How silly can you be? And they also didn't come home. They prophesied likewise. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they prophesied also. Hadn't he any vestige of memory about what happened when he first met them in Ramah? And he was turned into another man? Did he think that he could resist the power of God? The company of the prophets and mingling that with the praise of God and the hearts up to God. There was no power in Israel that could be controlled by that. That couldn't be controlled by that. And so the great man comes up in all of his towering strength. He went also to Ramah and came to a great well that is in Seshu, and asked and said, where are Samuel and David? Oh, foolish man. It's a terrible thing to read that, my dear friends. He knew where they were. What was he asking for? Because he knew what he was doing was wrong. And one said, behold, where you'd expect. They're perfectly at home. They're not fleeing, they're just staying still. They're in the dwelling in Naioth. And he went thither to Naioth in Ramah. And the Spirit of God was upon him also. Look at the mercy of God in that, my dear brothers and sisters. Wouldn't Saul begin to feel that he was tracking along an old path? The Spirit of God was upon him also. And he went on and prophesied. As it happened to him in the very beginning. God was giving him another chance. Until he came to the dwelling in Ramah, and he stripped off his clothes also and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Wherefore they say, is Saul also among the prophets? He was never seen there. David never forgot that occasion. You couldn't forget it, could you? Well, you could. Saul forgot it. But there was David's enemy, so to speak. There was Saul's enemy. And they were brought together, in fellowship together, in the company of the prophet who prophesied with harp. What a beautiful thing, my dear brothers and sisters. When David left that house, it says, verse 1, that David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came to Jonathan. When he fled that house, he remembered the power of that room. There was big Saul, there was his 3 groups of messengers. How many were there in total? We don't know. There was a lot of men in that room. And they were completely dispowered by the presence of Samuel and the prophets in that room. And one young man remembered that, and that was David. And I can imagine, because, you know, he didn't know a lot about Samuel before that, because it's not that many pages back, is it, that he was anointed, right? It's not that many pages back. So he didn't know Samuel in his early youth. Before Samuel came to Bethlehem, it's clear he had had no association with Samuel. Yet in that brief time, there has been some associations which are very beautiful and important to this whole record. And David has had experiences there that he will never forget. And what he's going to do is take what he learnt in that little room, and he's going to take that out of Naoth in Ramah, and he's going to take that up to Jerusalem, and he's going to concrete that whole concern and that power in an institution that will last in Israel for 400 plus years. What an amazing boy he was. One man saw it and forgot it within years. And the other man saw it and he'd never let it go. And he put that in a high position in Israel. He had seen that the singers that prophesied with harps were stronger than the greatest of the men. And he said, you generals, you come out and you see these men inducted into office. Believe that, my dear brothers and sisters? Not theory, isn't it? When the greatest pressures are upon us, the release of our feelings in praise to God and finding Him in the Word of God is the way through, whatever the problem might be. That is the way. David saw that. What he must have felt like with Saul, what? Inches away. Saul could have just pulled out his sword and killed him perhaps. But he was involved in the things of God as David was. Saul that wanted to throw a javelin tried 3 times already to do it. And there they were together in Samuel's house. David never forgot that. And he took that little thing that happened in life, he took that to great things in the kingdom. Very, very beautiful person he was. Samuel had been involved in teaching him great things. He never forgot that. Now let's come back to our Chronicles chapter, 1 Chronicles 25. These young men that were so carefully instructed were going to be involved in some of the greatest events in Israel's history. When the temple was opened, these 288 sons of Asaph, Heman and Jeduthun, they were brought together for this auspicious occasion. Just think, my dear brothers and sisters, of the power of what we're actually reading. You've got 14 sons. Just imagine 14 sons. I've got a daughter that's got 4 sons, just 4 sons, and, you know, she's finding that a handful. I had 4 sons, and, you know, they were a fair bit to do with. 14 sons. Imagine the table. Here we are. We need a table that size, wouldn't we? 14 sons. It's not that many years ago that people did have that. I remember being down at Riverton in Invercargill, rather, in New Zealand. And I was asked how many children I had, and I said I have 7 children. And I'm used to people sort of going on a bit, so I thought, oh, here they go. But it was an old couple. And they never said a word, and I thought, oh, how refreshing. And then I knew why, because this old brother, he quietly said, Brian, he said, I was one of 12. And then a little bit later, not to be outdone, she quietly said from the other corner of the room, Brian, I was one of 14. So there we were. He-Man might have been early in time, but he wasn't the last. 14 sons. How are you going to get those sons to learn to play together and to want to play and to learn their part and to work together and to listen to what Dad says? Because they've got to do it properly. These boys are going to be there when the temple is going to be open and the glory of God will fill the temple. These boys are going to be there. They're only young lads, many of them, and they've got to learn to do it properly. That's a most inspirational picture for family life. And you know, one of the saddest things in our ecclesial life is the loss of our children. You know, it's a pretty universal thing. It's something we as a body need to really think about. We are losing our children. Our children are being influenced more and more by the world that we're living in. Sometimes we are to blame. I mean that. We bring into our homes things that destroy our children's minds. We do. And we know we are. And we won't do something about it. And we're losing our children. You can go through large areas of ecclesial life, my dear brothers and sisters, and see an increasingly less number of children. Sometimes where ecclesial holes are going to be closed soon because they've got no future generation. I believe that our Heavenly Father will hold us responsible for that because we are not prepared to make the commitment we should to save our children's lives. We have said their course that they have to do, to be a whatever, dentist if you like, whatever it might be, is more important than them being in my home. And it's not. He will hold us responsible if we are prepared to allow the world to influence our children against the things of God. I can't put it any other way. I can't see it any other way. I don't want to be judgmental upon anyone. We've all got our sadnesses. We've all got our failures. But we are losing our children. And that means we've got to get together, love the truth. We've got to get together and say how we're going to stop that happening. Because it's got to stop, or we're going to increasingly dilute our ecclesias. Here were children that only knew one thing. 14 boys. And the whole lot of them learnt to do that properly. This institution went right through Israel, and 350, 400 years later, after the exile, these boys came out of the woodwork and they were able to produce exactly the songs, the way that David first ordained for them. Think about that. How was that done? Well, anything I can think of, my dear brothers and sisters, is that in the training of those children, there was such an ingrained consistency that those children were taught that when they had children, they had to maintain that exactly as it had been, that there be no deterioration. Otherwise, gradually, it would be lost, wouldn't it? How was it that they were able to come out of Babylon and still have the same costumes, the same instruments, the same music, the same harmony on the same day and working with the priests? What an incredible wonder that is. And it goes down to good parenthood. And I think we've got to help each other in that regard, my dear brothers. We've got to be serious about it, though. We love our children. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. I remember my mother saying to me once, I never thought I could love anything like my own children. And we were just sort of leaving the place, but she said, when your children come round, she said, I don't know. That was the grandchildren. We do love our grandchildren. And we love our children. We love all our children in our meetings. Whether they're ours or not ours, we love every one of them, and we do not want to lose any of them. And we've got to do something about that, because we are, as a body, losing our children. We must have to look at that problem more and more. Thank you.